Hello, everyone. This is Rohit Bhardwaj. We are here to talk about the productive cloud innovation for one of my talks for resilient cloud architecture design patterns. So, first, we'll try to understand how do we look at a project and how do we dissect to understand it better. So, I am a hands on senior architect at Salesforce and founder for the productive cloud innovation. So, let's dive into this talk, a brief talk. So first thing, let's try to understand what are the different areas which are resiliency we need to have in place. Number one is the failure points, and that's what we're going to discuss in today's talk. Next, we'll look at resiliency, cell-based architecture, auto scaling, reactive, timeouts, eventual consistency, caching, and failure injection. So when we call the failure points, we want to understand when the project is going on in production, no matter what happens, it is stable. Important thing to remember is this person who is going surfing, that person has devised the mechanism so that no matter how big is the wave, we are still able to survive. Now let's take a look at an example from Uber. When we think from Uber, what do we see? We empathize that we have a driver, we are going from one place to another place. We just landed in New York and now we are going to a ball game. Now as we do that, that's all part of the design thinking. We want to empathize, learn about the audience. Then we need to understand their viewpoint. How do they think about a particular problem? Then ideate the problem and ultimately create a prototype and we test it. When Uber started, it was a monolithic application. You can say that there was one branch for everything. There was two main things they were doing. One was back office work, and another was when the actual trip is going on. So as you can see, these were all different modules we had for users, products, trips, payments. They were all connected to each other. Now that caused problem for them and they tried to change that problem. But before we dive further, let's take a look at how the user who's using the Uber feels, how they hear, and how they see. What do they see? What are their pain points? And what do we need to do to improve those pain points? Why do we need Uber in the first place? So that's is what we're going to discuss next. Let's think about two different user groups which we have. One is the driver. The driver is going to register, make sure that he's able to go in and be able to register list of nearby passengers. A passenger is going in and saying that, oh, I need to go to one place, another place, and that basically brings down to different use cases driving this solution. Now, initially, when the Uber started, everything was in one box, real-time services as well as the backend services. What they did, the problem which took place was the availability. In order to make the availability of 99.99%, what do we need to do? That means unavailable time is around 5 minutes per month. That's a pretty tall order. If you think about it, that if you have one service, if you're providing 99.99% availability, if you have two services, this goes down. So the availability goes down based on it. So first, what we need to do is we need to think about eliminate any single point of failure. What is single point of failure? When we are trying to solve a problem, we want to make sure that there is no failure just by one point. And if there is a failure, there is a reliable crossover and detection of the failure as it occurs. As Einstein says that if I had an hour to solve a problem, I did spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So once we understand the problem which we are trying to solve here is how can we make the trip expenditure less? And how can we make that all our API calls deliver faster. That means our criteria is time it takes for a given trip. Second criteria is response time. If we have a API development, we want to make sure that API respond for less than 500 milliseconds, ideally 200 to 300 milliseconds. If it's taking more than that time, it causes problems. Then what we need to do, as we talked about just now, is let's look at from Uber's standpoint and find out from their standpoint, like, how they work. We all know that, first, as a driver, they first contact, they first try to use the system, and then the employee, we want to make sure that they are the right people who get into Uber. We need to do background check for them. Another problem is that whenever some user is asking for Uber, there is a wait time associated with it. How can we eliminate the wait time for that system? Another problem could happen is that, when we commence the ride, what could go wrong? So what we are trying to say is that identify all the different areas where you can have a fail point or risks of excessive wait time. How about we send a text message to the person that, hey, come here at this point and your ride will be less expensive. Another part is all these areas are the nuggets which we need to design our solution for. And those nuggets are important so that our system is resilient enough to be able to take care of the hit if it happens. Now let's take a look at from the book perspective, the art of scalability. The art of scalability is an excellent book I recommend from Martin Abbott and Michael Fisher. They talk about how can we more resilient, and that will be part of my next talk. But just to give you an idea about it, what we are saying, that whenever there is a failure point, if I have a failure point coming in, I have a way of knowing all those failure points and have a way of attacking those failure points. That's what the art of scalability can really help us out in our system. If you think about this diagram, the important thing to matter here is that to be able to deliver the functionality not just through the monolithic way, but also split it based on different services which we are trying to build. And the third dimension which we can also introduce is customer, our functionality and customer. So those things we will discuss more in our next talk, as you can as we talk about this in more details. So as we talk today, to recap the whole thing, what we talked today is the fail points. Fail points are really critical for any project, and they need to be thought through before we start the project or while we are doing the design part of it. So as I said before, we today looked at the fail point. In coming talk, I'm going to discuss more about resiliency and how that can help us build a resilient